The following is brought to you by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. TotalSeal.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of Hidden Horsepower, presented by Total Seal Piston Rings, the leader in ring seal technology. My name is Joe Costello. We have got another great show for you. Before we bring on our guest, I want to tell you that Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal is skyrocketing up the charts on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We thank you for subscribing and sharing and writing reviews about this podcast, a deep dive into the world and the mysteries and the science of engine building. It has been great. On this episode, we are going to be co-hosted by Lake Speed Jr., who is the head troublemaker, so he says, at Total Seal, and one of his mentors, the head engine builder at Joe Gibbs Racing, Mark Cronquist. First, Lake Speed joins us now. Lake, are you ready to do an interview with one of your mentors in the engine building world?
I am speechless right now. I'm nervous as I can be right now. It's just kind of neat. We talked on last episode. I'm a listener of Hidden Horsepower too. I listen to every episode and think it's great, and excited to be able to have Mark on here is really cool because, honestly, without Mark, there's no way I'm standing here today able to do this podcast. So that's kind of amazing,
It's got to be a very interesting position to be in. Your career has gone off on its own trail now with Total Seal, but not really in a different arena. You're still a tribologist. You're still thinking about the oil beneath the ring, right? You told us that last time. You got to keep the oil from the crown of the piston, and you'll be okay. And that's what you did when you were over there.
Well, exactly. That was kind of the neat part about, this growth. The Total Seal is that, that path to how I get the Total Seal, definitely goes right through that engine shop and through Mark and all the guys there at Joe Gibbs Racing. That's a big part of my life. And, Total Seal was a big part of the engine program. I mean, every engine they built over there still has Total Seal piston rings in it. So it's still like being family, it's different, but it's not too far removed.
Okay, so without further ado, let's bring him on. He's the head engine builder at Joe Gibbs Racing, responsible for countless championships, including 2000, 02, 05, 15, and 2019, and also oversaw massive switchovers in manufacturers and pumps out many, many of the most cutting-edge engines in all of motorsports, Mr. Mark Cronquist. Mark, welcome to Hidden Horsepower. How are you?
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm doing great.
Mark,
I'm at home right now, but I'm doing great.
Well, yeah, and the circumstances obviously a bummer, but when we return to the racetracks, everyone will be prepared as they can possibly be. It's going to be some great racing.
Oh yes, of course, always. Can't wait. I'm supposed to be in San Felipe, Mexico this weekend at the Baja or at the San Felipe 250 right now, and I'm kind of bored out of my head right now, so you guys picked a good time to call.
Well, perfect. Now, before we bring Lake back on, and I really want to hear you guys kind of talk about some of the experimentation that went on, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about Lake in that he just flat out said he gives you a lot of credit for where he is today, your work, your creativity, etc. But what did you see in this young man that made you think this is a good guy to bring along and to put in charge of so many different things?
I tell you, he talks highly of me, but I think I talk more highly of him. I still call him my oil god, so any question I have about any oils, rear end gear oil, transmission oil, engine oil, anything, I always call Wade, because when he first started working at Driven in the early days, it was crazy watching him study and learn and take classes. And I mean, within 6 months to a year, he knew everything about oils and was making changes in the right directions. And even if we made a change in the wrong direction, we learned from it and made it, said, oh, that didn't work, let's go back. And we were always smart enough to go back and say, okay, why didn't that work? Learn from it. And then eventually maybe it did work with some more additives or something else. But that was All Lake and the guys that he worked with, that's, I'm kind of, when it comes to oil, I 100% trust Lake Speed on what he does for me on oils. And now it's good that he's in the ring business, because now I can trust him 100% on the rings. So,
well, we did have a bit of a dream team put together back when I came over there, and Mark did give us, like I mentioned in the previous, podcast with Keith, that the resource that Mark gave us, to be able to have, 3 or 4, cup engines, brand new cup motors, to be able to go try different things with. I remember, that Asteric VM, we talked about it in the previous episode, Mark, with that one stuff that was like, was like 4 or 5 horsepower, better brand new, and then it used so much oil we had to stop the dyno like 100 miles into the race simulation. It's stuff like that. We had that ability to try it, and we had guys like Bill Abraham and Mike Mucha and Doug Jane, who were just brilliant guys that I was able to learn from, and then it's just the perfect storm. And then like you said, now being at Total Seal, we've already started trying some stuff, with like the Total Conform ring and the JD1 engine. It's to be able, you give us the resource, Mark, to be able to try things, and you can't learn if you don't try, and I just have always appreciated the fact you trusted us when we probably didn't do anything on the front side to deserve the trust.
Oh, no. Trust me. Well, first of all, we have to give Mr. Gibbs credit, because it's his money that I spent. So we have to make sure that's number one thing, that he let us have a big playground, that even the guys at Lubrizol, and I mean, it was fun for a long time, because it was stuff that everybody wanted to do, but really didn't have a place to do it in. I know Mike and Bill and them guys, they were like, hey, this is fun. We're learning stuff that they couldn't learn in their labs, because they didn't have the type of motor that we had. And I think the good thing about it all, I think everybody learned from it. Everybody that was involved in the projects learned something from it, So that was the great thing about all of that.
It is credit to Coach Gibbs. You're right. I mean, he's been one of the most amazing people ever worked with in my life. He did. He created an environment that made all that possible, Yeah. Fitting, which is why, the brand new engine that you developed, that's already a winner, the JD1, is named appropriately after JD.
Yes, sir. It's a little bit, means a lot to me to have his name on that engine, especially going out and winning our 4th off-road truck race with it. That was even cooler. I mean, it was one of the best pictures of the truck that's in magazines and stuff has the Joe Gibbs Racing engine logo and JD1 written behind it. And that probably meant more to me than anything in the world. So that was cool, and really honored to have worked for him and Joe and Coy and everybody there. So,
Mark, in terms of staying power, you've had staying power at Joe Gibbs Racing. You've had success over a long period of time, and it's challenging for anybody in any field to stay at the top. And even there's a fluctuation. You get the tune-up and you lose the tune-up, and then you find it again, right? When you're in your business, you've got some of the most competitive people in the world that are your competition. But how have you been able to stay cutting edge for all this time?
Well, I think it's the drive. I think it's winning's first. I mean, you can win a lot of races, and still, when you cross the finish line, when it's still a good day. When you're happy. But man, I tell you what, there's a lot of other engine builders out there trying to beat you and knock you off the pedal. Still, I mean, probably one of the 2 guys I probably want to beat more than anybody is Doug Yates and Jeff Andrews from Hendrick Motorsports. Doug Yates from Rush. Yates, man, I do anything I like to beat them 2 guys. I mean, we're almost like brothers, but I mean, it's nothing better than to go out and beat those guys in a win or something like that. That's probably what drives me more than anything, is just beating those guys, having as good a motor, better than theirs, durability is like theirs and stuff, because I look up to them guys too. And it's, it's hard you have to have a drive to do it. I mean, you have to push yourself. I mean, I'm sitting here right now designing parts for a part on the JD1 motor. Most people are probably at home doing yard work and stuff, and my yard does need to be mowed, by the way, but it's just a drive to keep pushing to be on top,
Well, it's the competitive nature, Mark's from a place where most people wouldn't even think about, somebody from NASCAR being from. Mark grew up in Alaska, and you come from Alaska down to the Carolinas, and interestingly enough, Mark was over at Bahari, the team that Michael Waltrip drove for when they had the Pennzoil deal, and Michael Waltrip, pretty famously punched my dad, after the Michigan race. And I think Mark may have been working on the team at that time, but anyway, so he ends up there. But as I said, it's that drive to keep always pushing, which, led to some things. So Mark, so I got to tell you, you got to complete the story. So in the previous episode, I kind of teased, about some of our crazy things we tried that didn't work, and I started to tell the story about the water-based oil. So I'll just kind of tee that up and let you kind of finish that story.
At least you're making me pull out the old archives. I remember that. That was some awesome horsepower making stuff. But is that not the one that evaporated really quickly? I mean, I think didn't the water base burn off when it got hot?
Yeah, that was the problem. We had this great idea that, okay, well, obviously water's low viscosity. That's going to be a really great deal. Yeah, but, of course, the engines run in vacuum. They don't run in atmosphere. The crankcase is not at atmospheric pressure. It's in vacuum. And while the water temperature, or say the oil temperature, the lubricant temperature, we'll call it that, right, because there's a water-oil mixture, was lower than 212 degrees Fahrenheit, which is the point at which water will evaporate at atmospheric conditions. But somehow or another, although there's a bunch of smart guys involved, somehow we forgot the fact that the engine runs in vacuum, and that lowers that temperature.
That was a great idea, except for that part. That oil, if I remember right, it made 4 or 5 horsepower off of our baseline oil at the time, and it was like, this is great. And then, man, it disappeared pretty quickly because, like you said, the vacuum lowered the boiling temperature. And nowadays, we run 300 degree oil temperature, or 250 to 300. That stuff wouldn't have been laying there very long at all, huh?
No,
but
no.
One of the things that was one of the things we were able to learn from it. And maybe it goes back you got to pull it out of the old bank in your head sometimes and say, hey, remember when we did that? And why didn't that work? And it makes you go different directions. I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing that I've learned in my career is when something doesn't work, just don't say it doesn't work and throw it in the corner and say, why didn't it work? I mean, to me, that is probably my biggest key to people and learning. And, my career was, I had one guy tell me, he goes, you're not the smartest engine builder I've ever worked for, but he said, what you do different than anybody else? I go, what? He goes, you're smart enough to say, oh, that's wrong, and go the other direction and see if it's any better the other way. So I said, well, okay, at least I get credit for that. So.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And we did that, right? A lot of times, like you said, we would try stuff, and it didn't work. We were like, okay, well, all right, let's try the other direction, and let's see what happens. And, the oil you use today is a classic example of that. It's if you look on paper, we can go way back in the archives and say there's something we tried years ago that didn't really work that well, and what you're using today is pretty much the opposite direction of that. Because that did work.
For sure. I mean, because we got there was times I think we got off a little bit on things in the motor, oil, piston rings, pistons, whatever, and sometimes you just have to step back and go, what did we do here? And you have to go back and learn from it and say, hey, why are we not sealing up right now? Or why do we have blow by? And, stuff like that. And you just have to go back and look and say, hey, this oil doesn't do this, or this ring doesn't do that. Or, there's everybody has their opinion, but you have to go back and look at the data yourself and say, what's going on here, So.
Well, like you say, we talked about it in the previous, episode I was on that, ring seal really is like soup. It's not just the broth. It's not just the chicken. It's not just the vegetables or the spices. In ring seal is not just the piston, it's not just the ring, it's not just the oil, it's not just the hone. It's all of them. And I can think back over the years working together, we've seen that. When we tried the mirror, the really low RA mirror glazed, deal on the bore finish, that didn't work at all. Just because even though it was smooth, it didn't hold enough oil, so it couldn't seal.
I tell you what, when you put a motor on the dyno, it's got high blow by and pan vacuums down. And man, when you start the list of people you can get mad at, okay, first of all, it's the ring guy. Second of all, it's the piston guy. First of all, it's probably the hone guy. You probably yell at him first. It's the hone guy. And then you start looking at the pistons. Then you start looking at the rings. And then you go back to the oil. Then you go back to how the guy bolted, how did he torque the head on to make sure the distortion's supposed to be right. Like you said, you're right. It's the whole entire suit, man. I'm sure piston people have been cussed before when the ring guy should have been cussed, and I'm sure the ring guy got cussed when the hone guy should have been cussed. And I mean, the honing stones are so critical of which ones you're using. And I mean, we ran into a batch last year of the stones had the same part number, but they were marked wrong. I mean, we couldn't get our hone finished just because the darn thing was marked wrong. It's like, luckily we caught it after a couple engines, and we couldn't get to where we was going. And it was like, why is this not it? And, got another batch of stones, and all of a sudden they're right. It's like, hey, what's wrong with these stones? Oh, those are supposed to be. They're marked wrong. That's just because some guy in some factory marked them wrong. I mean? And you're due to, that's not even a guy that even knew what that stone was going to be put into. He just made the stone, and he didn't even bother to nothing, So it's just crazy how, like you said, it's all one big soup,
One of the things you went through and learned in terms of the soup was, going from the gray iron blocks to the compacted graphite blocks, and how that was a big difference in trying just, managing getting the right hone just because the bore material is different.
That was a big one in the early 2000s when GM came up with the compacted graphite block. We were one of the first teams to get them. I mean, man, when you started honing, or even when you started tapping bolts and stuff, you could say, oh, this block's a lot harder. What do we got to do? You got to change stones. You got to do this. You got to do that. And it's just really learning building motors. And, at that time, luckily, we were probably building 400 motors a week or 400 motors a year. And we got to try a lot of stuff. And luckily, we got onto it pretty quickly. It's like this JD1 motor we started building right now. We've only got like 6 of them out in service right now, so we don't get to build them as much as we want to. And we're still fighting a little bit of hone-in issues, trying to make sure the cylinder bores are round. I mean, we probably built 10 of them all together, 10, 12. So, I mean, we're learning as we're putting it together, but man, it's hard. It's hard to learn without putting motors together and see how they run, what you really want to. I mean, sometimes you got to take the motor apart to see what it wants. Sometimes you're just not smart enough to know what it is.
There's some things that you can and cannot tell us because it's cutting edge technology. But the JD1 engine, if it's so new, like what's better or what's supposed to be better, or what's why the evolution?
Troy Herbst came to us about a little over 2 years ago and wanted us to build a motor for his off-road truck team. And we had just lost a bunch of business in the NASCAR truck going to the spec engine, so we said, sure. And we looked at a lot of the engines that were out there, the Donovan blocks and the big block Chevrolets and the small blocks and the Fords, and nobody really had, well, one guy had it, but being that he's like a brother to me, I couldn't use the Robert Yates RY45, I think they call it. So I couldn't use that one just because I couldn't copy something somebody else. I could use something he was using. So we basically took a clean sheet of paper and put all the latest technology that we know of into this thing. So it doesn't have the bolt holes next to the cylinder walls to help distortion. It has a lot of stuff that I thought needed to be updated on a motor like this, and that's what we came up with. But that being said, it's different from what a lot of people do. So we've had a couple head gasket issues. We're still learning on that, working on that. Still, we're getting the water flow down right. I think the head gasket issue is caused by a hot spot in water. So we've learned that. We're putting more water there. Just things like that you have to go out and race. You have to go get time on it. You have to get miles on it to look at stuff like that. So.
it's like you were saying a minute ago, the engine is going to tell you what it's like, what it likes. Yeah, that's been my experience from the oil side, which is, why, Mark and I, work together to do, oil analysis. Because in the end, that's going to tell you what the engine likes and what it doesn't like. If something's wearing, you're going to see it. You just got to listen to the engine. So, that was one of the things we did over the years is, do stuff like oil analysis, the visual inspection of the parts. And there's no substitute, like Mark said, of, putting an engine in service and then letting it run. And that was one thing, back in the early 2000s, in NASCAR, you had qualifying motors, you had practice motors, you had race motors. I mean, the guys at the track back then, it was brutal, to show up and with your practice motor and go out there and run first practice and then change motors and put in your qualifying motor, or go out there and run qualifying, come back and change the motor, put the practice motor back in, and then then run that last practice, then change motor, put your race motor in. It was, when you had those many engines, you had that much time, you could really learn a lot because you just had that volume of engines and you were able to see stuff so much more rapidly than you do now, especially when you've got to run engines multiple races.
Oh, yeah. Now, we used to take motors apart every week. I mean, I don't even think we put 150 miles on our qualifiers. We were taking them apart now. Now they're getting 2 races, 3 races on semi side. We're up to 4 races, and you don't see the thing apart for 6 months to 7 months from now. You'll see it apart. So it is very hard to, like you said, the evolution of it is definitely slowed down. Now we all, most teams now have AVL AC dynos, so we can do durabilities and stuff. And luckily, we were probably the first Cup team to have one, thanks to Mr. Gibbs. He let us purchase one in the early 2000, late 99, 2000. And, I mean, that was a game changer, too. I mean, where we could put something on the dyno and run 600 miles from 8 o'clock in the morning until 1 o'clock and then tear it apart and build that day. I mean, that, to me, was a huge game changer for durability, for testing parts, looking at, how light a rod can we go to, how small a bearings can we run, what kind of oil the thing has. I mean, when we were able to start testing in-house and doing those tests, but that doesn't mean it was the exact same on the racetrack. We still had to go to the racetrack. But to me, that stopped going to the racetrack 3 or 4 times. But that made the evolution ramp up big time.
Well, I said that lets you try something like, a 0.5 millimeter ring that would have seemed insane, 20 years ago. Back in the old days, 043 ring was small, and now, you're talking about something that's, 20, thousandths as opposed to 043. But yet that same ring can run, thousands of race miles now on a short block.
If I knew what I knew today back in 1990 or 1985 when I first started NASCAR, I'd be a genius. I mean, wow! You go back and you look at the size of connecting rods we ran and the size, how heavy the pistons were and how big the rings were, and all we did is, I mean, like you said, the 0.5 millimeter top ring. The thing looks like looks like you could break it if you touch it. I mean, people that know me, I have some pretty big hands, and I'm scared to touch them sometimes. They look so small, I mean, but man, them things seal up so much better than anything else. And now the new total conform ring, that thing's unbelievable. And now that thing's small and it's got slots in it. So you're like, holy cow, now the thing's really going to break. But man, you run it 1,000 miles, pull apart, and the thing looks brand new still. The ring, the cylinder walls look better, the blow-by looks better, the oil consumption looks better, everything just looks so much better. And you're like, the evolution, like you said, just goes, and it's crazy what it looks like today. If you looked at some of our motors back in 1990 and you look at them today, you would go, yeah, there's no way you can run that stuff. And now we're looking for smaller, better, and, even crazier stuff.
I know. It's, when we started doing that, the test motor, that's out there at Ronnie Shaver's, that we did, you and I worked on that thing together 10 years ago to do the hot rod oil, when we were trying to develop that. The best thing I ever did for that engine was get rid of the 043 Mahler rings and put in some Total Seal 0.7 millimeter diamond finish rings. The consistency of that engine just went off the charts better. You could just run it and run it and run it, and it became a Swiss watch. It didn't care, because it's just the durability was so much better with a smaller ring, which is, like you said, for most people, that's counterintuitive. If you'd said that in 1988, those guys would never believe you. Yeah, they're like, nah, that thing's gonna break.
But in 1988, we had motors that made 15 horsepower difference, and you built them the same. Now you build a bunch of motors that I don't know about everybody else, but we build them all now within 1 or 2. I think the days that we build a motor that's 4 or 5 better, I think it's a good dyno day. It's cold outside or something. It's crazy how consistent, like you said, how consistent the rings have made the motors more consistent. The smaller rings, they conform to out around bores better, and they do other stuff, that, man, back in the late 80s and early 90s, we had motors that were, this motor's 15 off, or this one's 10 better or something. We don't have that today unless we do something that is better or worse, But today, just the consistency with the ring manufacturers and the piston manufacturer and stuff like that is just so much better today than we've ever had. That, like you said, though, I don't think it'd be there if you had a 43 top ring in it still.
Oh no, there's no way that you look at we saw the degradation in power over time. The longer that engine runs, that bigger ring is just like a bigger file, and it just wears the bore more, which then changes the crosshatch, which changes the blow by, which changes the power. It's just I can look back and see that now, in retrospect, and say, okay, that was the thing that was changing it. Has been able to do that. I actually thought about you the other day. I went outside to go mow my yard, and everything in my yard, my cars were all yellow because of all the pollen here in North Carolina. And I thought about that was one of the things that we found, right, is that was one thing that could change the dyno numbers is when the pollen came rolling in the spring, you'd lose a couple horsepower. Just you couldn't figure out why.
Always right. And the other one that we thought about is when the guy comes in and changes Varsol. We can almost document it now that when the guy comes in, puts new Varsol in the shop, and you can smell that in the air, that for a couple of days we fight that also right now. That we don't like the dyno on days that the Varsol gets changed out. I don't know what it is, but we can almost prove it, that it's like, why are the motors down? And you'll go, hey, the Varsol got changed out yesterday. You wait 3 or 4 days to get that smell out of the air, and all of a sudden the motors come right back up. So it's something to do with oxygen or something in the air that it doesn't like. Like you said, that stinky pollen. I'm sitting here looking at my computer right now. It's almost yellow. It's like, dang, I got to go wipe this thing off.
Well, there's another one, Varsol in the shop. You think about the controlled air system. It's using it's grabbing from the shop air somewhere. And like I said, if you can smell it, it means the light ends are evaporating, which means it's getting in the engine, and the engine doesn't like it.
Yep. I guarantee places that have a lot of pollution, not saying nothing about LA or any place else that has it, but you got to fight that there too, right? You would think.
You'd think, yeah. Those are the little things you learn over the years of doing it, and you just look backwards, and you don't really, because you don't know it at the time, but you just kind of you don't give up on it. The one guy said, you just don't give up. We're not that we're smart. We just don't give up, and you don't just leave it the fact that, okay, it didn't work, that just garbage, throw it away. You kind of note and say, okay, well, if it didn't work, we just don't understand something. And I know that from the chemical side, that when something didn't work, it meant we were missing a piece of information. Because chemicals are stupid. They're only going to do what they're designed to do. And if it didn't work right, like it was predicted, that means we're missing information somewhere. We just don't know where it is yet. And then maybe later on, you figure it out,
Yeah, but man, you think about the NASCAR engines, the Toyota motor came into the series in 2007. The R07 came in 2007. The Ford motor, I think, was 2009. So you're talking, we've been with these motors over 10, 12, 13 years. Man, how much can you really keep beating on it? So the gains we're gaining are the little things, the onesies, twosies, and you have to be confident in your testing that the direction you're going is the right direction. Because if you think you have a bad dyno day, or it's raining outside, or it's really super hot one day and it's cold the next day, and you say, oh, that's 3 or 4 better. You better go back and test it, because I tell you, you can make the wrong step, and all of a sudden, you know, three months down the road, you say, you know, these motors just ain't that as good like they should be. And then you go back and say, oh, look at that test. You know, that was, you know, we should have tested that again. You know, I preach it in my shop. You know, let's ABA it. You know, let's put it back together. Let's take another motor and do it to it, because, I mean, the little changes you do, those onesies, twosies, you better make sure they're right, and you know, or you're going to be going down the wrong path. You know, we kind of did that on a piston thing last year. We got off for about 2 months on something we told the piston guys to do, and we ended up undoing it and gained it right back. We're like, oh, that wasn't very smart of us, was it? You know what I mean? So you better make sure when you test it, you know, cuss the hone guy, cuss the ring guy a lot, and it was the couldn't cuss the piston guy either, because that was something we told him to do. So it was like, oh, that was not us.
I know Jason Line said this one time, and he was one of your proteges, obviously, and he was the very first guest on Hidden Horsepower, by the way. Jason was, if it won't repeat, it's not real.
Yes. Yep. You're right there. That's something he always said, and that is a good point. If it does not repeat, it's not there. Don't, you know, and I love engineers, but sometimes it's directionally correct isn't the right thing to say either. You know what I mean? Sometimes they'll go off and say that, oh, it's directionally correct. And yeah, sometimes it is, but sometimes it doesn't make sense why it doesn't work either, and it just doesn't work too. So,
Mark, talk a little bit about Jason Line. You know, noticing he has been big in the drag racing world. We get to interact with him on a regular basis. His final year as a driver in pro stock, you know, he's going to focus on engine building and all, but we often reference his time with you guys on the Cup side. What was he like at that time?
I don't know if you want to ask me that.
Oh, I do. Oh, believe me, I do. And I'm going to text him whatever you say.
I will say this about the 3 or 4 years. I think he worked for me for 3 years. Jason Line taught me a lot about dynoing, and I taught Jason a lot about consistency of building motors. I think both of us could sit down and tell you that, because at the end, Jason he was great at making sure that when he came and said this motor is down, that it was not the dyno. You know, he proved to himself that, no, this motor is down, my dyno's fine, and stuff like that. But can I say, I have to tell a story about Jason Line. This is the greatest story I have about Jason. So when Jason first came to work for me, he would go back to Minnesota to go home to see his parents all the time. You know, not all the time, but once a month or something, go spend the weekend. So he comes to my office on a Thursday one day and goes, hey, can I go to Minnesota? I go, dude, we got to have this motor down on Friday or on Monday. It's going to be done. We got it done. Oh, yeah, I'll be back by, you know, he goes, I'll be back on Monday. I go, when's your plane getting in? He goes, noon. I said, okay. I said, I'll have it on the dyno, have it ready for you. So I had noon. It's on the dyno. It gets 1 o'clock. I'm like, okay, let me run it. So I run the dyno, and I'll never forget it. I met Jason because of DTS dynos, and DTS dynos, you had to press F2 to start the fuel pump. And I never remembered that, and every time I'd make a middle of dyno pole, and I'd be out of fuel, and I'd have to press F2. Well, 4 o'clock, I'm on my last dyno pole, and I run it out of gas, and I hear him laughing down the hallway. He won't even come to the dyno room. He's laughing. And I'm like, I said every word in the book. I get the motor done. I get done. I'm lashing at final lash. He comes walking. First thing I start yelling, you told me the plane got in at noon. He goes, yeah, it got in at noon in Minneapolis. I didn't tell you got in at noon at Charlotte. I just shook my head and said, only you could come up with that. You ask you when the plane gets in, and you say noon in Minneapolis. And then I got on the plane and came here. I said, you got to be kidding me. That was a Jason Line classic, how he would do me.
No, and will serve us very well the next time we speak with him. Thank you for that.
Yeah, ask him when the plane gets in.
Ammunition.
What time does it get in at Charlotte? I'll never. I mean, I made that pole and the motor started missing because I didn't hit that fuel pump, and I heard him laugh, and I said, "Are you just too scared to come back here?" He goes, "Yep, right now I am." But Jason's a great. I think I helped him, but I can surely tell you he helped me a lot on dynos and making sure stuff's consistent and how to dyno and all that stuff. He is definitely a great dyno operator.
Tremendous. Now let's get some numbers out there as best as we can. Just because we, as listeners, think about Joe Gibbs Racing, a premier, if not the premier, Cup Series team in NASCAR and many other areas. In terms, we think of Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex, Eric Jones as the faces, etc. But how many engines do you crank out? A year, a month? How does that work? Everyone's got to have engines that are equal. Nobody gets the good engine anymore, as far as we know. So give us, as best as you can, just some numbers. How much work do you do?
Okay, well, right now, everybody's got to remember, we have not done the Cup engines for the NASCAR team since 2012. TRD out in Costa Mesa does those. So up until 2012, we did all the engines for all the Xfinity and all the Cup cars up until 2012. There was a time before they went to the one engine rule back in 2003, 4. We were doing over 400 motors a year. I keep saying a week. Over 400 motors a year. Now, I'll tell you, with the way it is, I think we built for last year, the whole Xfinity team with the 3 normal teams that we did. I hate to say this, I don't think we built 40 engines last year. So that's one reason why we went out and started looking for more business, outside of NASCAR to get those numbers back up and stuff. Now, on the Cup side, I know you can just say there's 40 races. They have to run the motors 10 or 12 of them or 13 of them twice. So you're looking at 30 engines per team that probably has to be built, maybe 20, 25 in that area probably, because you have to run them. Some engines you have to run twice. So I'm going to say probably around 25 per team. So if you got 4-team company like Joe Gibbs Racing, there's probably 100 engines a year built for the Cup cars and probably 30 to 40 for the Xfinity. So, the numbers are there, but they're not like what they used to be, just because of, the economy and the step backs after 2008 and stuff. We really had to lean that out and get more efficient, which is, it makes us better too. It's just kind of like F1. What do they get now? 6 or something like that for the whole year. So, it's not what it used to be, and that's why the AVL dynos and the durability dynos are valuable. So you can keep doing those, so. There's probably in that time, on the Cup side, there's probably 30 R&D engines built besides those other ones built for R&D purposes. So.
Once upon a time, engines blowing up was part of it. And now it's almost, I don't want to say non-existent, but very rare. Is that, it's obviously what you've learned, but is it improved parts, pieces, metals, technology, design, everything? Speak on that, how, an engine failure is a rarity, whereas once upon a time it happened on a regular basis, every race.
Oh, yeah. Back in the 80s, you'd have 5 or 6 guys fall out engines. And, it didn't seem, the car owners and the sponsors didn't seem to get that mad at you. But now you blow up a motor and the boss is down there and, the sponsors are calling you. It's not acceptable now. And you really think about what we do, but. Hats off to all the manufacturers, the oil companies, the rod companies, the bearing companies, the crankshaft guys, the manufacturers with the blocks and stuff. The one thing you got to remember, back in those days, we were taking stock blocks and making them into Cup motors. Now we got design blocks that are better, compacted graphite that's better. So, it was a huge evolution, and that's what came about it is there is no, there's still problems, and people still have problems. People still go through issues. Probably right now, not picking on our spring guys, but the valve springs are probably still the number one issue. But and I tell Larry and Matt from PSI Springs this all the time. I go, whatever made you think about taking a piece of metal and pulling it into round and then twisting it into a circle, doing all this prep work, then hand it to some butthole like me that wants to turn it 10,000 RPMs and then hand it back to you and say, hey, it broke. I don't know if I'd ever get into spring company, but that is, but man, my hats off to them guys too. They have turned what a spring was in 1997 when they first started to what it is today. It is completely different, but that's the evolution of us guys pushing the manufacturers to get better. Same as Total Seal rings. You go back to when we bought Total Seal rings back in early days, you know, they were the Molly Ring and stuff, and look what they've done. You know, how they got diamond lapped and these small, tiny steel rings and stuff. It just made all the manufacturers stepped up, and all the ones that are still here today, there's a lot of them we don't use no more because those people didn't step up. The ones that are still here today are the companies that put forward the effort to make their product better, to step ahead of the next competition. Because, you know, the ring guys are ring guys, right? They want to be the best ring guys. Motor guys are motor guys. They want to be the best motor guys. So you have to line yourself with the best, and that's, you know, the companies that are out there right now that are still building race car parts and still building parts, they're the best because their owners and their people are competitive too and want to be the best. So
I think you just summed it up right there. Yeah, that's it. It's you got to step up. You know, Mark was, you know, the first guy in the Cup garage to, you know, buy we'll call it the modern Total Seal piston ring, not a gapless ring, but the diamond finish ring. That was something that Matt told me that story. You know, that once Matt knew what he could make, he went and talked to Mark and said, you know, what if you could envision your perfect piston ring, what would it be? And Mark listed off all these things, and Matt said, we got this, we can make it. And Mark said, here's the PO, I want them. You know, and that's it. You know, so it's like he said, you got to step up. You got to be competitive, and you continue to drive. And that's one thing that, you know, is awesome to be able to continue to work with Mark. You know, like I said, we, you know, putting the total conform rings into the JD1 engine was, okay, we're looking at what that engine's doing and what it needs, and here's a ring design for it, because you're just trying to get better. And that's what makes it awesome to have a guy like him that's, you know, a customer/partner in the growth of Total Seal, because we just keep getting better because we keep working together. You know, it's a two-way street, and that's something that I've learned from Mark, and have tried to always pass that along with everybody else who work with it. You know, if it'll be a two-way street, we'll always get better together than we ever will alone.
Boy, you hit it right there. Like, that is. So I know a lot of guys that may want to hold their secrets away from their manufacturers, or they don't want to tell people. Man, I tell you, in my life, I've learned that, man, you talk to Total Seal and you have a problem, they help you fix it. And when your things are going good, you help them test stuff. And like you said, it's a two-way street. A one-way street sometimes is not a good way of going, because you put yourself on an island and you get yourself in trouble, and man, it's hard to get off that island sometimes by yourself. And I mean, you have to work with your partners to keep the evolution going, because none of us are the most smartest people in the world. It's like one thing I always say about Lake Speed. He's my oil god. I don't know that much about oil, but Lake does, and Lake's my partner. So that's why I call Lake when I want to talk about oil, because he's smarter than I am. You have to find them people in your life that know rings better than you know rings, and know this part better than you know parts, because there's somebody that works on pistons or somebody that works on rings only, and they're going to be smarter than you are that works on the whole package, putting it together. I like to think I'm smart on some things, but I think Matt and all the guys at Total Seal are the smartest guys with rings. I don't know that much. You know what I mean? I know what ring I want. I understand what they do, but these guys are the ones that know how to build them and know how to do this. I don't know that. Same as the piston guys, same as the cylinder, you know, the manufacturers of the blocks and stuff. They're the professionals. You gotta have a relationship with these people, and you gotta trust them, and they gotta trust you, and that's the way the world turns. I mean, that's how I built my career, and I think it's worked out pretty good for that.
Tremendous.
Amen.
Simple as that. And Lake, normally at the end of every show, I ask our guest to impart a little wisdom to the up-and-comers out there, the person who is mechanically inclined, maybe starting a shop, maybe building their first engine, maybe early on in the curve, some sort of wisdom. Mark, you might have just done it right there. That was unprompted and amazing. Anything else you'd like to say to those folks out there that are the next wave following in your footsteps that they could find useful?
Oh, that's okay. I gotta get ready for this one. I would say broaden your horizon. Make sure you know CAD. Make sure you know a little bit of engineering. Make sure you know how to hone a block. Make sure you know how to fit rod bearings. Make sure you know how to do it all. Because when you, like in my position where I'm a manager, I lead department, I think I have a lot more trust with my employees that work for me They're like, when I go and talk to Doug Easton about building a motor, he knows I can talk to him because I've built motors. And when I go in the engineering department and talk to Dustin, and we're working on CAD, he knows that I know a little bit about CAD. I don't know it all, but I at least can get my way through that stuff. Don't sit yourself on, I'm going to be the best engine builder, but I'm not going to do that. You have to really broaden your horizon and know a little bit of everything, because that's going to get you further on down the road.
Mark Cronquist from Joe Gibbs Racing, thank you so much. One of the best, Lake, one of the best. Hearing you guys just kind of talk about the current situation and circumstances out there in the context of the technology wave we've seen over the past 20 years, simply amazing. Lake, any final thoughts for Mark?
Well, I'm just thankful that Mark was able to come on, that we had this time. This time of year, normally we would not be, blessed to have this kind of time. So we're trying to make the best out of this current situation. And thank you, Mark, for sharing, like you always do, just open book and not being, reserved and hiding all the information to yourself. And just thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate everything.
Oh, no problem. Appreciate you guys having me on. Call me anytime.
Thanks, Mark.
And there he goes, Mark Cronquist from Joe Gibbs Racing. Lake, that was amazing.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. I'm glad he was able to get on here, and Mark's just a great guy. Like I said, he's been such a mentor to me. You can kind of probably pick that up, right? That his philosophy is, that's where I got it from. It's not that I was smart and got all this stuff. It's that I had a guy like him that was a mentor that kind of showed me that way. And then you just keep, repeating those things, and they work. So you keep going back to them, because those same principles, are really important. And part of what he said too is a lot of that comes from the top down from Joe Gibbs. Joe's an amazing leader, created a great organization there that enabled a lot of that, and very thankful to be able to be a part of that and try to carry on that legacy,
We've already decided that Mark's going to have to come back on in the future to share maybe some more of those stories. Right? This was like laying the foundation of what could end up being multiple episodes, because I know you guys have more stories. I was very happy, though, that he threw Jason Line under the bus a little bit.
Oh, of course, he's got to throw Jason under the bus. I mean, Jason, I'm going to tell him myself. So I have a nickname amongst certain friends that I'm lack of speed. And that was directly from Jason. So Jason is going to give hell. He's going to get some hell, too, back. So it goes both ways with Mr. Line.
There it is. Now, Lake, for our listeners out there, they're working on an engine project. This is the time where Keith would normally give out his number, tell them where to go, tell them what to do, implore them to call before they go out and buy everything and then make a mistake on the rings.
Oh, yeah. So please, call us at Total Seal. I mean, the guys are there. I don't have the 800 number memorized because I'm still the new guy at the place, but, TotalSeal.com, all the information is there. Also, we got a great YouTube channel now. If you go to YouTube and type in Total Seal Piston Rings, go to our YouTube channel. There's lots of videos we've created that are there that have a lot of that information, which, I would say if you're really serious about a project, go to the YouTube channel, watch some of those videos first. All the Hidden Horsepower episodes are there, by the way. Watch, listen. That'll get you some basis. Then call up Keith or Kevin or Bobby and talk to those guys and walk them through the project, because that'll give you some of the background language you need to help them be able to get you further, faster, and be able to unlock that hidden horsepower in your engine.
800-874-2753, and you'll get one of the guys there. Lake, thank you so much. You are beyond halfway in a stint as co-host. The job with Keith Jones, tremendous, getting to hear about your background and your father's racing and how you got here. Now with Mark from Joe Gibbs Racing, tremendous. But the next episode is going to be Shaver Specialties Racing Engines. You mentioned Ron a little bit in the past couple of episodes. What do we have in store?
I can't wait for this one. Ron's like my second dad. It's the testing we did and the experience out there with Ron and Don and Dan and Keith and Craig and Paul and Dennis. I mean, all the guys there, Manny, everybody at Shaver Specialty Racing Engines they're near and dear to my heart, because they're people that that's where like Mark said, he's not just a guy that just kind of has theoretical knowledge as a manager. He's also a guy that has honed blocks and does some CAD, right? He's got his hands on. Shaver specialty is where I really did a lot of the hands-on stuff. Like, they weren't going to let me touch cut motors. I could, we could talk about things in dyno and test things, but I wasn't the one running the dyno. At Shavers, I ran the dyno. That's where I got to be hands-on. So it's really kind of neat to be able to kind of bookend, talking to Mark and then be able to go talk to Ron because of the parallel of experience, as well.
Well, that is great. Something to look forward to for you listeners out there. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, the YouTube channel, all places you can hear the podcast. Watch those YouTube videos and hit their website, TotalSeal.com. Lake, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe.
And that'll do it for this episode of Hidden Horsepower by Total Seal. My name is Joe Costello. You can follow me on Twitter at WFOJoe. And I am just so honored to be able to host this podcast and learn so much from the best of the best in the engine building trade. It has been amazing. We've got past episodes. If you've missed any one of them, go back, Apple Podcast, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube. Listen to the old shows, starting out with Jason Lyon. We've had Stevie Fast and right on through. They are waiting for you if you like what you're hearing. And if you like what you're hearing, there's more to come. So be subscribed. Stay ready. Another episode of Hidden Horsepower is coming soon.